Hi, Rosemary. Hi, Michael. Sorry for the delay. Welcome, everyone.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, Tara.
Hi, Tara.
Oh, Caroline. I was afraid you didn't get the message. Good.
I'll be back in, I've only got a couple of minutes. I'll be back soon.
Okay, I'm going to go on mute because I don't have good bandwidth, but I can be reached in chat or Skype.
Are you hearing me, Tara?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Hi, Caroline. Katie.
Hi. Hi.
Muting my microphone too.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? Tara, everyone?
Yes, absolutely. We can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Hi, Rosemary. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
It's
Good.
Robin.
Hi, Robin. Hi, everyone.
I'm just going to welcome everyone to the call. This is our second GFAN side event at AIDS 2020. Thank you all for coming. We're just going to wait a few minutes to allow people to join the call before I turn it over to you, Rosemary. I'll just let everyone know now that I may shut your video off surreptitiously if I feel like your sound is cutting out, just to help with bandwidth. So if your video suddenly goes, don't worry, it's probably just me because you just haven't been coming across clearly. We just want to make sure that everyone can actually hear your voice. And ideally we can see all of our beautiful faces, but,
Yeah.
but we'll just do our best here. If anyone has any presentations, just let me know either in the chat and I will have to make you a co-host just so that you can share your screen, because if you're not a co-host, you cannot share your screen. So just let me know and I will make you a co-host. So Rosemary, why don't we just give it one more minute and then I'll turn it over to you.
Okay. All right.
Bruce is going to be showing slides too, eh, Tara?
I'm sorry, I just didn't catch who you said.
Bruce from WHO. He's
Okay,
not on the call yet, but he's going to.
Okay, when he comes on, I'll make him a co-host. Thank you.
I only want to say hello.
I definitely won't be doing slides, so just so you know.
So nice to see so many familiar faces.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, everybody.
It's so nice. Missing you guys so bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We should be meeting in person. Javi, how are you?
fine. I'm missing seeing people in the corridors, hugs, and catching up or small talks. Doesn't matter.
Small talk over drinks.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the virtual cocktails that aren't quite the same as the real ones late into the night.
But at least we're still having the virtual ones.
Well, we can afford better quality of alcohol probably at home.
Robin, were you just on the WHO call?
No, I wasn't. I was on the call
boardroom.
computer.
Yeah, no, that's right. Seeing you on that one. Bruce has just been speaking with Tedros and civil society. I've been getting WhatsApp.
Oh, okay, great.
Well, I can see that we're 1 minute past the hour. So I'm wondering if we should get the call started. We can always leave a few minutes at the end if we want to have a little chat. But I know that a lot of people are quite busy, so I want to make sure that we can get through our call today. So I will, without further ado, I'll turn it over to you, Rosemary, and you can get the call started.
Thank you, Tara, and welcome everyone to this session on access to COVID-19 to Accelerator, otherwise known as ACT. And so this afternoon or morning, based on where you are, we're gonna be having a conversation on what opportunities exist for civil society engagement. A lot of civil society colleagues have been hearing about ACTA. Some of us here have joined different conversations here and there. But I know the question of how can we strengthen civil society engagement, how do we navigate that space are still questions that we have. And therefore this conversation organized by the Global Fund CLG, FIND and the Global Fund Advocates Network is really going to help us make progress and enhance our understanding around that. We have a number of speakers lined up for us here. And to get us started, I don't know if Bruce is here already. I know he wasn't here. I don't know if Bruce, you're here, but I just did want to mention briefly about how the session will run. We will have a quick introduction and background information by Bruce, and he is the WHO Hub Coordinator. He's the lead for the support hub. And he will give us an introduction around the ACT Accelerator, followed by a number of presentations. The presentations are split into two segments. We will have presentations that will focus on the Diagnostics Partnership, and then another set of presentations focus on the Health Systems Connector. So Bruce will be the first presenter. I don't know if Bruce, you're here. I know you have a presentation, if we can get that going. And as we are doing that, also to remind us that for those who registered earlier, the bios and the background information was already shared with you by Tara. And also this call shall be recorded and shared with participants and other colleagues through GFAN. So just wanted to flag that out. So Bruce, are you here?
Yes.
So awesome, thank you and welcome. Is that Brooke? Yeah, that's Brooke Baker. And I'm looking for Bruce from WHO for the first presentation. So Tara, I don't know if we have that in the presentation.
I don't see him on the line, nor do I have his presentation.
All right, so I think in view of that, it would have been really nice to start with that presentation, but just given time is also very limited, perhaps we can go into the next speaker. So for the diagnostics partnerships, we have Katie Wright from GFAN, we have Caroline, and we have Emma. Caroline is a member of the Developing Country NGO delegation to the Global Fund and member of the R&D for new tests, digital tools, working group of the Diagnostics Partnership. And Emma is a special advisor for the Diagnostics Partnership from the FIND side. So I don't know, Katie, I know also you have limited time with us. I don't know if you would like to go first and just recognizing that we don't have Bruce's presentation to proceed yours, but I think this would be a good time for you to come in, Katie.
Thanks, Rosemary. Hi, everyone. It's Katie. What I would, my time is a little bit limited today, and I do apologize. But Emma, I'm just wondering, you were supposed to be the first amongst us, and I can stay on certainly for the first 30 minutes of this. And I'm wondering if it might be helpful as the overview that you would provide if you did indeed start. Sorry, Rosemary, to cause confusion, but I was able to move my call a little bit further. So Emma, I don't know if I could pass it to you just to start us off. Sorry.
I'm super happy to, and I can do as good a job as I can on framing up the ACT Accelerator in Bruce's absence, and he might be jumping on a little late. I know he has some pretty long days, and he might be able to add to it later if that would be helpful.
I think so.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that background will be useful as you get into your own set of questions.
Fantastic. And I did have some backup slides. I wasn't 100% sure if I would use them, but I think perhaps considering we don't have Bruce's context, that might be quite useful. So if you're able to make me the co-host, fantastic. I can share those and use them for giving you a little bit more context. So I think some of the things that Bruce would have talked about are that the ACT Accelerator was launched in late April as a collaboration amongst many partners in order to accelerate the delivery of needed tools for the COVID-19 global response. The ACT Accelerator has within it a number of pillars, and those pillars include vaccines, treatment, diagnostics, and a cross-cutting health systems pillar. And I'm part of the team on diagnostics, so just so that you can kind of locate me in space amongst the ACT Accelerator pillars. So what I might do, which I think I would have probably otherwise brushed over, is talk a little bit about how we've structured the diagnostics pillar, just because it's not identical, but there are some similarities with some of the other pillars. And so that might be helpful context for folks. So the vision of the diagnostics pillar is to be able to drive equitable access to diagnostics. I think we all know that diagnostics had tended to be somewhat of an afterthought issue, but has really been front and center in the COVID response, critical for underpinning both a good clinical response, but also a public health response for vaccines, and also a needed ingredient if you are thinking about rolling out effective treatments and effective vaccines further down. So one thing I think that's somewhat different for diagnostics and the other pillars is, of course, that there are diagnostics for COVID on the market. So we're able to get operational now. There's both an R&D component in sort of spurring new innovation, because the tests that we have aren't really perfect when it comes to being deployed, particularly in low and middle income settings. But in addition, the partnership's already kicking off work thinking about market shaping, supply, and the country capacity questions, because there are diagnostics that are already available. In order to sort of structure the work of the pillar, we have these sort of 4 priority areas, and I'll show you how they then link into the working group structure for ACTA. So they roughly align with the value chain for diagnostics development. So the first one is focused on R&D of tests and also of digital tools. So collecting data from diagnostics and using that to drive the public health response is really important. And so that's one area of focus for the partnership. The second is around market readiness and market shaping, particularly on questions of manufacturing scale up, which are somewhat unique and different in the diagnostic space compared to, say, medicines, for example. The last one is around sort of supply and supply chain management for diagnostics. As many of you know, there's an existing group, the Diagnostic Supply Consortium, housed within WHO, who's really leading on this work. And a lot of that work falls under the broader ACTA diagnostics umbrella. And then lastly, around kind of country preparedness. And I think we've realized that preparedness makes it feel like it's further into the future, but really this is more broadly around the country implementation of diagnostics, having the right diagnostic strategies, having the right capabilities amongst health workers to do lab tests, and also the appropriate laboratory test footprint. So in terms of how the partnership or the pillar is structured, so it's co-convened by FIND and by the Global Fund. I then help with some of the process management piece and the kind of secretariat work that comes with this. The pillar doesn't exist as a separate legal entity or as a separate organization. Essentially, it's a bunch of partners who are working together on a combined work plan. So that's sort of just to kind of position a bit this work in space. So there's 4 working groups within the partnership that roughly align with the value chain and with those priorities that I talked about earlier. And they in turn each have 2 co-leads from a range of organizations, from the Africa CDC to WHO, to PAHO, to UNITAID, Find co-leads 1, through to the Gates Foundation and Presence Foundation. So, so those are the 4 big cross-cutting working groups. Underneath that are some work streams that really back up and support the work of the working groups. One is around data foundation and modeling, co-led by some of the Imperial College modeling team in the World Bank. Many of you may know that there's been relatively less sort of the academic work and modeling specifically focused on diagnostics, especially from a sort of global focus, so addressing some of those gaps. There's a strategic private sector engagement group co-led by the World Economic Forum and the Gates Foundation, who in turn essentially help facilitate an industry advisory group, which is made up of a sort of range of industry and has co-leads or co-leads or co-chairs of the industry advisory group, who are then able to be a sort of information flow back and forth, but also to manage kind of conflict of interest around private sector engagement. And then lastly, there's the advocacy and community engagement working group. And so for civil society, and Katie and others on the call might add further on this, there are civil society representatives on all of these working groups who are in turn part of the community engagement working group. So that's the connection up. So those groups 1 through 4 and the others, they have a representative who then also sits on that group to be able to provide a sort of two-way flow of communication between the different groups. And I think I might just sort of add a few last thoughts. I didn't have any slides on this last content. So the first sort of initial period of the partnership's life has really been focused on resource mobilization and the question of what resources are needed in order to effectively deploy a diagnostics response to COVID. And that investment case has been worked up by the partners with a $2 billion immediate need and a $6 billion need over 12 months. And that has been what our colleagues in resource mobilization have been working hard to raise. There has been now 2 pledging rounds that have been led by the European Commission towards that target, but we still fall short of those financing needs to be able to mount an adequate response, particularly around the areas of supply, so procurement of diagnostic tests, and around the country preparedness piece. So we're sort of very conscious on, I think, the gaps overall for the partnership and in those specific areas, and that effort continues. That said, I think unlike other, other periods of time, this isn't a case of doing everything sequentially, linearly, where we might do all of the resource mobilization first and then get going. We've got going with the action straight away because the needs are so acute. And so, for example, we launched an EOI just over the weekend to try to address some of the R&D needs and manufacturing scale-up needs, particularly focused on the antigen rapid diagnostic tests, which, as many of you will know from other disease areas, have been a really significant game changer when it came to deploying more widespread diagnostic testing. I think I've spoken a little bit too long. I might pause there because I suspect there could be questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emma, for the introduction and even for taking us through an introduction and background of the ACT Accelerator. And perhaps, you have mentioned and shared with us the framework and the structure of the ACT Accelerator, and we have seen areas where civil society representation, civil society and community representation has been included. Perhaps I would really like to ask you what you think and what you see as the vision that the co-conveners have for the role of civil society and community on the working group, over and above the structure and the inclusion of CS reps. Like, what is the real vision that that exists among the core conveners. If you can perhaps answer that like in 1 minute, so that then we can move to Katie and see what role GFAN will be playing going forward. So Emma?
Sure. So I think there's a few principles that are really important for the partnership that civil society can play a really important role in. I think one is around, and the main ones really center around equitable access and what that means for communities at a global level, because I think that's a really important perspective to bring across the partnership. I think secondly, one piece that I think is sort of very particular for this partnership, so they've renamed pillars. It's gone back and forth of pillars to partnership, and I'm going to use the two interchangeably, and I apologize in advance, is that we can get operational with the tools that we have now. So there's the ability to actually deploy these diagnostic tests now, and they might not be the perfect tests. They might be still very central lab tests like the PCRs that many of you would have seen in countries used extensively already, or they may be less well-functioning tests, but we have them. And so I think we are at a much more operational point when it comes to engaging at the country level. I think that's also a really important perspective that civil society can bring. I went over a minute, Rosemary, I'm so sorry.
Thank you also for playing the double roles of introducing and also sharing the vision around civil society engagement, civil society and community engagement. Katie, I think I'll quickly turn to you. In the presentation by Emma, we have seen the working groups and the civil society and communities opportunities. And we do know that GFAN played a critical role in identifying civil society and community representatives as placeholder seats as we navigate through a process that would be more representative. So going forward, what role will GFAN be playing in order to support civil society engagement in the ACT Accelerator? Katie?
Thanks, Rosemary, and thanks, Emma, for that overview. So, I mean, I think the role, I do have one little slide here to share in some of our previous calls, just to give you an idea of sort of how we got here. And what I like to say to people is we got here because we actively pursued this, right? Our goal as GFAN from the beginning, and talking with, you know, representatives from Unitaid, civil society constituencies and Global Fund constituencies and a host of other actors, was to get to early, sustained, and direct engagement by civil society and communities within each of the pillars or partnerships and across the whole ACT-A partnership. Like, we asked for these seats, we asked for these spaces, and we advocated for them. So I think, you know, that's an early sort of, you know, win that we've had. I think this is a brand new structure, right? And we could get lost as advocates within trying to make structures perfect, or, you know, define terms of references and those kinds of things, which are all very necessary in terms of identifying what it is that we do. But it's also really important to remember that, you know, we bring, as Emma sort of said, a number of different really important aspects to the conversation, including those that she mentioned, equitable access and getting tools operational, but also, particularly from GFAN's perspective, resource mobilization. We've seen, particularly for the diagnostics platform, really poor resource mobilization, if I can say that. While there have been billions that have been raised, a lot of the money is tied to and donors are self-selecting where they, you know, sort of want to put resources. And so the Diagnostics Pillar, you know, has a 12-month plan, has an investment case, has identified a number of things that they would be able to do with that, and at the moment simply does not have that funding. So our objective has been to make sure that within, you know, this platform, where the Global Fund has been an early sort of co-lead with FIND, that we were a part of that. I think we were trying to get representatives in place and lead what we hope will be overall a transparent effort throughout the lifetime of this ACT Accelerator. And so we have been working to try and brief people and bring people on board. But again, because this is sort of a new I don't know how you would say it, like a new effort. It hasn't been seamless. I wouldn't want to say that it has been. But what we hope to do, right, going forward, now we're in a place, the Diagnostics Pillar, on regular partnership and coordinating committee calls, being able to share out notes with the other representatives who are on that, and that will continue, and trying to convene the Diagnostic Pillar, civil society and community reps on a regular basis. What we're also trying to do as GFAN is bring a little bit, lean on some of our past experience as conveners and facilitators, and bring both the civil society representatives and whether they're interim or permanent to the other pillars within ACT-A together. And so, for example, we have a second or third of those calls tomorrow, so that the civil society representatives in vaccines and diagnostics and therapeutics and the health systems connector can all speak together and talk about issues that are in common, and perhaps come up with work that they can do in common, or ways to work together on particular issues that may be arising in different pillars. And then the third piece that GFAN hopes to be able to do is to continue to bring this knowledge to the broader civil society and community that are impacted by COVID, or who are engaged in advocacy and or work around COVID. And so we held a first call on June 18th about that, and that was really about sharing more broadly where things are at this stage in terms of civil society and community representation, because it is still to some extent developing. And we hope to sort of hold calls like that at least monthly, and on, you know, when we can, or when it's needed, to discuss particular issues, whether they be, you know, about key new products that may be coming down the pipeline sooner, or different ways in which the different pillars are seeking expressions of interest, or whatever it might be. And so those are the three ways that GFAN hopes to continue to engage around the diagnostics pillar, in terms of facilitating the civil society conversations there, civil society collaboration amongst the representatives to the various pillars, and then also convening a platform with hopefully with you, Rosemary, from WACI Health, around bringing these issues to broader civil society and community. So the one thing that I would just love to be able to highlight is that we, you know, this is all being done, like everybody, and like always, this is all being done from existing resources. There are no sort of new funding pots or resources that have been made available for this work. For example, we've tried to find a consultant to run the selection committee for the diagnostic representatives, and, you know, we'll be paying for that out of our own budget so that that can happen. And we hope that that will be launched the week of July 20th. So people should be sort of looking out for that. And at the moment, what I would suggest is the best way to keep up to date on at least where we as GFAN are engaged is to join the GFAN listserv. I'm sure there's a better way that we need to do this, and we will get there. We just haven't gotten there yet. So I hope that's helpful and gives folks an idea of where we're going. And again, that slide's just really an overview of where we have been and where we're hoping to go in terms of GFAN's engagement. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Katie, and thank you for all the work that has been done by you, by GFAN, and all other colleagues who have been involved in helping us as civil society and communities to navigate the weeds as far as the ACT Accelerator is concerned. And a lot of us have been wondering, how is it like to actually be a civil society representative in this initiative, either at any of the working group? How does it work? And how has the enrollment process been? And I'm also looking at the chat and seeing quite a number of questions coming in, and actually feel free to share your question there. So at this point, I would like to bring Caroline to share with us her own experience as a member of a working group. Caroline is a member of the R&D of Tests and Digital Tools Working Group. So Caroline, can you tell us, please, what your experience has been? Have civil society been able to contribute? Welcome.
Hi, morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, and great that you could join us. My experience with it has been really very, very positive. I've been sitting in on the calls that Katie outlined from early in May, and pushing hard to ensure that we are all there and that we are having an opportunity to keep up with the rapid development of ACTA, and that civil society has the opportunity to input. And it's been a crazy process. I don't think Katie has explained how much of our time and energy has been spent, but it's been a really good process, because once the push was made, and I want to thank Peter Sands, who was also very big on letting us know that this was happening and helping to push to make sure civil society was included. But the reception and the way of working has been very, very inclusive. And here I want to give my hats off to Emma for her work to make sure information is shared in a timely fashion, meetings are called, we know when it's going to be, we organize convenient times, and that we have access to all the information that is shared in those various working groups. I'm specifically on the R&D of tests, but I also sit on the broader coordinating group for the Diagnostic Pillar working groups, so that everybody knows what's going on with everybody else and where the choke points are and what is actually happening. We have weekly calls for R&D, and it's an opportunity to ask questions, input suggestions, review documents. As I say, we have everything ahead of time, and anything else we're notified when things are coming out in between meetings. We're given an opportunity to input on as extensively on the expression of interest for the rapid diagnostic antigen test that is now a big focus of that group. And we're right there to understand the breadth of the coordination and cooperation, but also to be able to bring the unique perspective of civil society to the group. I think I'm not going to spend any length of time here, and better we have questions, but one of the challenges that certainly sitting on the diagnostic pillar has shown, and Emma mentioned, that the focus on ACTA has been on the vaccines and therapeutics. And this is not the focus of ACTA, this is the focus of the rest of the world. A large part of the donor focus has been on being up the front with the vaccines and the therapeutics, when in fact the diagnostics are ready to go right this minute. And interesting modeling work that's going on is showing the real importance of the diagnostics, one, in reducing the need for therapeutics and vaccination, but also in reducing the economic impacts and the lockdowns and the widespread dislocation of other health services, if they were able to be rapidly and effectively deployed. So I'm going to use this as an opportunity for a plug for people to get involved in it. I'm sitting as an interim rep, and we're hoping once the call goes out that we will get somebody with lots of energy and enthusiasm and activism for each of the working groups and also the coordination. But it is a really open and fantastic opportunity. But we also need to use our resource mobilization skills to make it clear to the donors and to the rest of the world that diagnostics can limit lockdowns. Diagnostics can limit human rights abuses caused by lockdowns. Diagnostics, if effectively deployed, can in fact improve our delivery of the other health services that we're also interested in my case, AIDS, TB, and malaria. Just to say that we need to push, because this crisis is impacting our programs, all our programs across the world in health, in very frightening ways. And I'll stop there and leave space for questions if anybody wants, or maybe we do the questions after. Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Caroline, and everyone who is leading in being some of the pioneers from civil society communities to help us navigate the path within the initiative. As many of you know, within the ACT Accelerator, we have the 3 pillars. We have the diagnostics pillar, which we have discussed or had presentations about. We also have the therapeutics pillar and the vaccines pillar. And then we have the cross-cutting connector, which is the health system strengthening. And so I think we will do a quick transition. You will hold your questions so that we can go into a quick a set of questions with 3 of our panelists who will be helping us to understand better the health system strengthening cross-cutting connector, as well as look at opportunities for civil society engagement in there. To help us do that, we have Kate Thompson, we have Robin Montgomery, and we have Javier Belloc. And so I'll start with you, Kate, as the co-lead of the community-led responses component of the health systems connector. What do you see as the mandate of the health systems connector, and what role can community and civil society play? Kate, if you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you, Rosemary, and hopefully you can also see me now. Can you hear me and see me okay?
Yes, yes.
Great. So hi, everyone. It's lovely to see so many friendly faces. The health systems connector came to existence after the creation of the 3 pillars. And the idea of the connector is really to complement the work of each of the respective pillars, which are vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics. So it's really not about duplicating what's being done, but more about identifying some of those critical health systems and community systems bottlenecks that are impeding delivery of therapeutics or diagnostics or vaccines for COVID. So it's very COVID focused, but at the same time acknowledging that we are working within the context of broader health systems constraints and challenges that pre-existed COVID. So there's a number of work streams, and maybe I'll just go through those quite quickly. So there's a health financing work stream, which is really about, among other things, assisting countries to identify and prioritize where to invest, and advising on how to mobilize resources, and also create accountability for financing, including using the UHC 2030 coordination platforms as an example. There's then a work stream on protecting frontline health workers. So, and the immediate priority on that is really to ensure availability of PPE to frontline workers, but also understanding the gaps that are there included in terms of needs, advocacy, guideline implementation, support, disposal, and so on. And also supporting implementation of community-based services, including things like scaling up of training for frontline services. There's then a data management work stream, which is really about supporting countries to sustainably strengthen the information systems that are needed to address COVID, as well as looking at crisis monitoring and the watchdog function, which many of you I know are very familiar with on this call. There's a supply work stream, which is looking at demand forecasts and landscaping assessments. A private sector work stream, which is, from what I know, mapping some of the UHC 2030
Hello, I can't hear Kate.
Did
Is
you,
it just me?
Yeah, you muted me, I think, but I'm muted. I don't know how much of that you missed.
Just 30 seconds. Go. Keep going.
Okay. So yeah, I was talking about private sector work stream. Then there's also a clinical care work stream. But most important, well, not most importantly, but very importantly, there's a community-led responses work stream. This is really about enabling the actor, both globally and importantly through country level support, to enable a joined up, coherent community and people-centered approach. And so I joined a bit late into this, this work stream, and I'm co-leading with UNICEF. I think, based on the conversations, and it's great now that we've had like Robin and Justin and Javier join over the last week. We're looking at really how we can expand the membership to include some of the other work streams, because what we've realized is we've done some mapping and seen that a lot of there's different elements of community responses across the different pillars. and work streams to try and pull all this together and ensure that there's no duplication, and we're actually reinforcing and supporting those other elements of community responses across the actor. So trying to, I think moving forward, we're really going to be trying to join those dots across the different parts of the accelerator, and having people join our meetings, joining other pillars where needs be, and also analysing and advising on the whole of the actor around how to support community-led responses at country level, really plugging into what already exists. So I hope I haven't gone on too long, but that's kind of where we're at the moment. Again, it's been very fast moving, with quite often trying to, even from where I sit, trying to pull at the different pieces of information. And I think we've got a better sense now across the global health entities, sort of coordinating amongst ourselves, the civil society focal points, and also with the ACT Accelerator Hub through Bruce and his team there at WHO. So I think it's starting to feel like a bit clearer to us in terms of how we move forward. But I would say there's, absolutely no doubt, the value of community engagement across the connector and across the ACT Accelerator is going to be critical. We can't do this without community and civil society engagement. And I know I'm worried that we're a bit short on time. So I'll stop there for the moment and hand back to you, Rosemary.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Kate. And thank you also for highlighting the need for all the civil society and community representatives across all the pillars to actually connect the dots and to see where the work interacts and where we can leverage from each other's work. So I'll quickly move into the question for you, Robin. Just given what Kate has shared with us as far as community engagement within the health systems connector is concerned, what kind of skills or experiences do you think are needed for civil society and communities to engage within this particular connector or pillar? Robin?
Terrific. Thanks so much, Rosemary. And hi, everyone. So I'm also an interim civil society representative who has just joined the Health Systems Connector conversation. And I'm trying to share my screen here. There we go. Can everybody see that? So I'm dialing in today from the beautiful unceded territory, traditional lands of the Algonquin Nations in our beautiful capital city of Ottawa in Canada. So it's really great to see everybody here and have so many familiar faces and new voices. So I'm just going to go quickly through this, recognizing that we have very limited time. These are the Health System Connector work streams that Kate was just talking us through. And again, really, this is a work in progress. In many ways, we are building the plane as we are driving it. And it is a very fast evolving discussion, and there are lots of advancements every day. So, when we think about who and civil society engagement and meaningful representation on each of these different work streams, I kind of came up with just a very draft list. We know that there is a draft matrix that is in some sort of development at the moment, and it's not necessarily to ingrain it in stone, but more as a reference point to help facilitate conversation and discussion within the Health Systems Connector, but also to help to shape some of those terms of reference that will be coming out shortly to engage civil society and community representatives in the different work streams, as well as from other sectors. So I guess, in terms of a general overarching principle, we really want to ensure that we're putting forward, as a community or civil society representative, community-led responses, and that the engagement of community and civil society voices is extremely meaningful and is reflective not necessarily of the global north, of which we have seen the ACTA largely being dominated by, but also, and importantly, voices from the global south. In terms of general skills and experience, of course, first and foremost, it's people with lived experience and at greatest risk of COVID as an essential starting off point. I think having experience and expertise in the different areas that help to ensure resilient and sustainable systems for health will be critical. So this is not only in terms of formal healthcare services, doctors and nurses, laboratories, but also, and importantly, community systems, because we know that with all of the lockdown restrictions that are happening, the response is really going to be at the community level. We want to ensure that individuals part of this connector really are grounded within a strong human rights framework, with an understanding of the social and structural drivers of COVID, as well as some of the biomedical and the clinical aspects, that we have a firm understanding of how COVID has an impact on key and vulnerable populations and on gender in particular. Different funding mechanisms, so in the health financing work stream, I think that will be extremely important, particularly around social contracting and how to ensure that funding that is at country level does make it down to the community level. Looking at advocacy campaigns, community-based advocacy or community-led monitoring, a wide breadth of formal and informal health and community responses. Examples in terms of supply chain, it'll be important for market shaping, procurement, treatment access, community-led monitoring to help to oversee and watchdog treatment disruptions, for example. Digital health technology, data management and innovations, community understanding of how tasks shift in community delivery of services and within the formal healthcare, really trying to bridge those two healthcare settings. And then of course, the capacity building element, not only of formal healthcare staff, but also community health workers, including those who are within like peer educators and outreach workers. So not solely those who are in facility-based care, but are very much grounded in community. And then I think most important is to have energy, because this is, it is quite demanding. It's very exciting. A lot of opportunity for us as community and civil society groups, but it is time intensive. And so I think, you know, while all of these structures are being created, I think one of the most important resources for anyone who is going to be moving into this space is having access to broader networks that are cross-sectorial, and that we can not only leverage expertise on some of the critical issues that are on the table, but that we can ensure that there are feedback loops and there's continual information sharing, so that the engagement really is responsive and really is from the voice of implementing countries or countries' greatest impact from COVID. Thanks, I think I'll leave it there and just wait for our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin. You have really pointed to the need to get civil society and community engaged in this conversation, not just those of us who are sitting in different working groups within the ACT Accelerator, and really try to figure out how does this not stay up there, but actually get down to civil society and communities more broadly speaking. And at that point, I will bring in Javier with a question around how can we do exactly that? How do we ensure that this doesn't sit at high level, but that actually it can reach civil society and communities more broadly speaking? And how can we also connect the health systems connector with the UHC 2030? Welcome, Javier.
Thank you, Rosemary, and thank you, Kate and Robin, to basically very briefly introduce this new community-led response or engagement with this connector, because it's brand new. And we have very few days or weeks on discussing this. But let me get very quickly with a previous point. Thank you, Robin, to highlight it, what I think is your proposal for the set of skills that people need to experience. Not something that we already agree or discuss. Of course, as many other people said, we are placeholders. we need to basically launch a process where civil society representative will go through a process and more balance to make sure that they will take our places for whatever this initiative lasts. But if you see the slide of skills experience, I don't think I know anyone in the UN system, global health institution, and civil society, whatever is in the north or in the south, that match all the skill sets you outlined in Robin. So we should be very carefully with that, because if we go through this path, and I'm not arguing with Robin, I think you did that, you outlined things that I totally agree. But if we go through this path, we are closing the opportunity, especially for Southern or civil society working in the developing world or in implementers and countries and NGOs and civil societies and CBOs to come forward. It's very scary list, and probably not even have half of these skills in my experience. And back to your question, Rosemary, I think that we, UHC, especially CISM, which is the Civil Society and Community constituency of the UHC 2030 partnership, we have been invited and engaged on this HS process. And again, what we expected as civil society engagement mechanism is to jump into this spin run, into this machinery that is running very fast and very complicated to hold the place and bring the perspective of a membership of 1,000 organization, but also a well-balanced, comprehensive advisory group, which not only works on communicable diseases. So at this stage, we train our best to bring our CISM advisory group and the membership to advise us, Justin and myself. Justin apologizes because now in the middle of the night sleeping. But I think there is a lot of things going on. We will be meeting, I think, tomorrow, and there is also a lot of thinking. I really want to especially thank Kate and Matthew and other people, Robin, of course, that we are thinking how we can do better. And I see that bottom line is one, this whatever you want to call accelerator could have the opportunity to connect the dots of some of the things, also bring together civil society representative in diagnostic treatment and vaccines. But at the end, also don't forget that ACTA, whatever, we don't know the answer, this crisis will evolve, which also need to come back into the universal health coverage discussion, access to health systems, etc. So, and for us, it's very important in the health system, and I don't want to repeat what Kate actually articulated very well. For us, civil health workers or frontline health workers are not only doctors and nurses, are also civil society, key populations, people living with HIV, working at the community-based organizations. And I will continue speaking because I want to hear, and we are running out of time. Thank you very much, Rosemary.
Thank you so much, Javier. Thank you for pointing that out and also for offering insights and guidance on how we can make sure that civil society and communities from high burden countries or implementing countries, if you may, are also part of the discussion. So I know we are coming very, very close to time and actually running over, but I do know that Bruce is here now, and I did want to make sure that, Bruce, we check in with you if you'd like to say something. We already had an introduction of the act from Emma, who kindly took us through that, but I did want to invite you to see if you had something to say. Bruce? If you can hear me.
Hi, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Great. Well, first of all, I have to just extend huge apologies, folks. This crisis has just upended all of our lives. You hear that and live that every single day. And sometimes it's every single minute, even when there's an event like this that I had committed to some time ago. And as Michael, Kate, and others know, I've been so keen to be part of. So Emma, thank you very much for stepping in, saying a few words about the ACT Accelerator and introducing it, probably more succinctly and clearly than I could have. But you know, the key point that I wanted to share, Rosemary, is when you look at the big goal, purpose of the ACT Accelerator, this cannot be achieved without the deep and meaningful engagement, not engagement, role of civil society right through it. It has taken some time to work out the mechanics of that in some parts of the accelerator. And that's caused some concern to some people, and that's unfortunate, because at heart it's recognized that this will not be successful. Just like the COVID-19 response itself would not have been successful where it has been. Just like so much of the rest of what we do in international health in the HIV world that I actually originally come from, this won't be successful either. And as Emma probably let you know, this is such an important issue for also the principals, the heads of agencies, the co-conveners of the pillars. They've actually discussed it together 3 times now, figuring out, okay, how do we optimize this? Because it's not optimized across the pillars. So I think that the big message I want to share is that that is recognized, that there have been some stumbles along the way to get there. We are learning and we'll continue to learn and stumble, unfortunately, as we go. But one of the things that might be a most positive indicator, Rosemary, of the fact that the need and centrality of civil society and community organizations to this agenda is recognized, is that this is the 3rd Zoom meeting I've been on today with either members of civil society or representatives thereof talking about ACT and the need for that engagement. As we look forward, I head up the what's called the ACT Hub, which is supposed to be a very light mechanism to help coordinate the work of the co-conveners across the pillars. But as we go forward, we want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for civil society to engage with ACT. And the role we can play at the Hub is really to point you in the right direction, make the connections where they're being made, when they're not getting sorted out, also help make sure you connect with the right people to be able to fix problems that arise as they may going forward. We'll be a bit of a clearinghouse as we go forward. But I want to emphasize, and Emma, you may have done this, that the real power of ACT sits at the level of the pillars. We've highly delegated in the setup of ACT the power of the engagements, the structures, the work planning, to the pillar co-conveners. So that's really where the issues need to be solved. We do recognize, however, that there will be challenges sometimes, and that's where we are to try and help as we go forward. Rosemary, those are a couple of big messages just to share. I'd had a few slides that I prepared for the presentation, unfortunately wasn't able to give, but perhaps what I could do is share those with yourself, Michael, others, and they could circulate to the group in case they're useful as a reference for people who may want to speak to this agenda or explain it to some of your constituencies as you go forward.
Yeah, many thanks, Bruce, also for finding the time. We know what a busy time it can be, for the leadership around ensuring that we have strong civil society and community engagement. And we do know that we are all navigating this, and so we appreciate that. And I do know we have ran over our time. We have a set of questions on the chat. A lot of them have been answered, but I think I'll just call upon one person to just ask one question. I see Brooke. Brooke, you have a number of questions you have listed there. Perhaps I invite you to maybe present one of those questions and then we can close. Thank you.
Well, my last question is the one I'd asked to Bruce is civil society engagement, as I understand it, and the allocation principles that WHO is responsible for leading has been weak. And I wonder what concrete plans there are for ongoing civil society participation and input there, and the possibilities of further development. And one reason to ask that is that, you know, it's not clear at this point that the allocation principles are going to be really exercised at the global level, that it's much more focused on, particularly in the vaccine field, on low and middle income countries, and that's simply an inadequate framework.
Can I jump in, Rosemary? Yeah, thank you, Brooke. This is so important because so many of the people that talk to me talk about this agenda as making diagnostics, making vaccines, making therapeutics. And that's only one part of it. And frankly, if that's all we achieve, we failed. This has got to be about the equitable access and allocation of these tools, exactly what you're emphasizing, Brooke. And in the original setup of ACT, there was a lot of emphasis on the three big vertical pillars and the cross-cutting pillar of what we call the health systems connector, as you just discussed with the excellent discussion around that. But there is also a cross-cutting work stream on access and allocation. It's actually led by WHO, and as opposed to the other pillars. And the ADG who heads that up, Mariangela Smau, I had the conversation with her, and she is completely, as you know, she's a big advocate of the role of civil society, and it wants to engage civil society in this specific area. But Brooke, we have to differentiate two things when we talk about access and allocation. We've got the access principles, which cross-cut all of the pillars, and that discussion can be had through that work stream with Mariangela. We've got the what we call the access, the allocation framework, which sets out the broad principles and should be robust across tools. So irrespective if it's PPE, if it's a vaccine, whatever, there should be some broad let's say framework, pardon me, about how those things, scarce tools should be allocated. But then we get into the allocation mechanism. So for example, the COVAX facility, which is being established, COVAX vaccine facility, that will have a specific allocation mechanism. That conversation, however, happens at the level of the vaccines pillar. So it depends a little bit the piece of allocation, but the broad principles, the broad framework where we're discussing now has got to be, can be had with WHO. So what Mariangela has done is she's brought on Nono Simalela, one of the ADGs here, to help put together that consultative process with civil society on those principles, on the framework. Brooke, just so you know, and everyone else on this call knows, this is the ideal time to have this conversation because WHO has just this week issued, or is just issuing, for consultation, a document called the Allocation Framework. And that is, you know, something concrete that people can engage on, discuss, provide the input to Mariangela and the group through our mailing point. So that is, so there is a mechanism being put in place for that, Brooke. And unfortunately, originally people were thinking, oh, all of the consultation will happen within the pillars. But for the point you raised, Brooke, which is that broader allocation principles framework, you need another mechanism. So if we're a little bit slow to the table putting that in place, but the commitment is there to do it in the recognition of the importance of it. So thanks for flagging that issue.
Many thanks. Thank you so much, Bruce. And thank you everyone for your participation. To all the panelists, we really appreciate your time and your input and what you have given us for discussion here on this session. For all the civil society and community reps who are helping us to navigate these, congratulations, well done, keep doing it. And we are behind you, supporting you, and kindly connect with us and let us not leave anyone behind in this civil society and community engagement. So thank you so much for your participation. We have come to the end of this session. I thank you very much.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Thanks, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.